Welcome to Next Femme Leaders, a podcast for conscious, ambitious women who want to make a real impact with their careers without losing themselves or their well-being in the process. I'm Isabel, your host, a leadership coach with over 13 years of corporate experience. I know how hard it is to lead in systems that were not built for us, especially if you're introvert, kind, intuitive, or spiritual. So here I will share the tools that blend the practical and the mystical, the feminine and the masculine, so that you can lead with clarity, confidence, and authenticity. If you know in your bones you're meant for much more, you are in the right place. So let's start! Hello beautiful woman, welcome back to the Next Femme Leaders podcast. In today's episode we are talking about the saboteur that is probably the most dangerous one for high-achieving women in corporate. The reason it's so dangerous is because it looks exactly like a strength. And this is the hyperachiever saboteur. And it is also at the top of my own saboteurs list. And I see it constantly in the women in my coaching program becoming her. And if you are a high-achieving woman in a leadership or executive role, this episode might be eye-opening for you. And if you're earlier in your career, it's just as relevant so you don't fall into this trap neither. The model I will be using today is from Shirzad Chamine and his positive intelligence theory. There are many models about these topics. This is just one of my personal favorites as I find it simple and powerful. Two words that you know I'm a fan of. Shirzad Chamine has done extensive research on these topics and considers saboteurs as the parts of you that react to challenges with negative emotions. His models consist of managing the saboteurs while also strengthening what he calls the sage, the wise part of you. This is quite a similar exercise to what we do in Becoming Her, my leadership coaching program, where we focus in strengthening your inner mentor, the one that holds your vision and knows the way, while also learning how to lead your inner team, where the saboteurs come into play as well. The reason I want to bring these to explore together is because many of my clients at a senior level had the same reaction I did when I learned it was one of my main saboteurs. It kind of seems like a good thing, right? Because the hyperachiever is probably the most normalized saboteur in corporate women. It is rewarded externally and it is invisible internally. So today I want us to go deeper and we will cover what are the main characteristics of this part of you, why it is sabotaging you, what is the cost specifically in your leadership at this level, and how to transcend it so that you can step into your next level. I believe this will be very relevant to many of you. Being a hyperachiever myself, I tend to attract these women into my community as well. Also important to note, when we are talking about this saboteur, we are talking about a part of ourselves. We are not 100% of the time like this, and we also have other parts in us. Another thing I'd like to clarify is that this saboteur comes really from strength being overused. And this probably starts to answer your question. Is not wanting to achieve things a good thing? The women who have this as their main saboteur are usually driven, pragmatic, adaptable, goal-oriented, self-directed, capable of growing themselves and others to achieve full potential. When they are inner directed, they can be great at inspiring themselves and others towards meaningful growth and achievement. And I remember a client at the senior level telling me, why do I have to change this? This is what has taken me so far in my career. And here is a little distinction that I think many people get wrong. When we are working with an executive coach on our next level, the work we do in Becoming Her, it involves change. But at the core, what we want is the next level of you, which is more of you. The next level of alignment. What we want is you to be in coherence between your vision, where you're going, your thoughts, your emotions, and your actions. And I always tell to my clients, we don't want to change this part of you, this beautiful driven woman who can do so much for this world. What we want is to support you in being strategic about how and especially when you use these superpowers, so they can take you farther and not hold you back. And that is exactly what we do today as well. Because something my therapist told me years ago that has always stayed with me is the one who has a hammer thinks that all the problems are nails. So the problem is not that this is your strength. The problem is when you only allow yourself to tap into this part of you to the point that it becomes an overuse and a saboteur of your progress. So what is actually happening with the hyperachiever? The challenge of this saboteur is that the hyperachievers have a constant impulse to achieve goals, with external validation as the main source of the personal validation. As I say, this is one of my main saboteurs as well. If you know my story, you know I was in finance and I had quite an international successful career, working for big companies such as PwC, Allianz, NN Group. And I love my work and I love improving, so I was always chasing the next big step. And although I started working for myself more than a decade ago, it was really when I stepped into entrepreneurship that I had a huge identity crisis. Being really honest with myself, I had to realize how much of my value I had placed in the fact that I was an accountant, and how much of my happiness power I was giving to my career, to the point that even if all the other areas of my life were feeling really good, when my career was not thriving, I was devastated. So my ego was crushed when I didn't know how to introduce myself. I was no longer in finance and not yet settled like an entrepreneur or an executive coach like now. Because for the hyperachiever, self-validation, self-acceptance, and self-love are all conditional. Conditioned on continual performance. And that is really the high cost of this saboteur. Because when we give our worth to something that is outside of ourselves, the moment that is not there, we crash. So in some way, it's putting us in a very vulnerable position. My first year of entrepreneurship, I need to build back who I was when I was not my career achievements. This saboteur comes from very early experience in life and is often the result of either conditional or altogether absent validation from parental figures. So even when we have very loving and approving parents, as it was my case, it's really easy for children to get the sense that they are loved in return for achieving. For example, obeying the rules, having good manners, rather than unconditionally. And it is something I discovered very early in life, always bringing home great grades and receiving that constant recognition. The problem, when we condition our self-worth to something outside of us, external validation, titles, results, we are outsourcing our power. And this is one of the key things I work with women. It's not that we no longer want the results. I love improving and seeing my career achieve recognition and seeing results in my clients. But there is a difference between wanting it and needing it. Wanting it means you are in the driver's seat. Needing it means the achievement is driving you. And when we manage to want without need, this is such a powerful force. We become better negotiators, we become more strategic, we build bigger on the longer term, and we take better decisions. We allow ourselves to play a bigger and a longer game because our worth doesn't depend on the result anymore. And we find ourselves suddenly falling in love with the process. And at a senior level, that distinction is everything, because it is something that is felt by others, even if they can put a finger on it. One of my clients, just after we worked on this saboteur in our first 2 sessions, shared how both her leadership and her team mentioned she was different. The moment she decided, my hyperachiever is asking me to push for the next level, but I want to enjoy where I am. They couldn't explain it, but they could feel it in her presence. And here is the key. What is this saboteur costing you specifically as a leader at this level? The farther we go in our career, the hyperachiever also shapes the way we lead, and the cost becomes much more visible. First, it comes with exhaustion, stress, and many times burnout. Because when we are always after the next goal and the next result, there will be always a next thing. And that feeling of never being good enough follows you everywhere. Hyperachievers are really bad at celebrating because the focus is always on the next step. Nothing ever feels quite good enough to stop and acknowledge it. And sometimes we're really also bad at making our work visible because of the same, because it doesn't feel like a big thing. It is a constant focus on the half empty glass. And this becomes a real blocker when you're building something long term or leading through a multi-year transformation where results don't come overnight. Many times this saboteur also makes feelings like a distraction from goals, without giving them space. And we know what happens when feelings don't get space. It is like a pressure cooker that at some point explodes. And at a senior level, this also shows up in delegation too. Hyperachievers fear that nobody will put the same effort, the same standard, the same care. So we hold on, we overfunction, we become indispensable, but for the wrong reasons. Because here is the real leadership cost. When we are working harder than anyone else, and often without even realizing it, we're sending a signal. And the signal is, I cannot manage this level, imagine the next one. We're also giving ourselves that message internally when our worth is tied to hard work and personal output is not scalable. And leadership at the senior level is not about what you personally produce, it's about what you create through others. So the hyperachiever, if left unchecked, keeps you excellent in your current role and invisible for the next one. So now that we already discussed what are the characteristics of this saboteur and what is costing in your leadership, let's talk about how to transcend this strategically so your strength take you farther instead of holding you back. So the first step is to catch a saboteur and name the cost. You have heard me say this before, but you cannot change what you cannot see. The first step is starting to catch this saboteur in practice. Now, this can be a really frustrating step. When we start becoming conscious of these patterns, we suddenly see them everywhere. So when you catch it, some practice that can help, journaling about it, or a mindful meditation that grounds you back to the present moment. And what I see with many of my clients is that once they see their saboteur, once they name it and understand it as an overuse of their strength, they are able to allow their drive and desire for impact to be fuel and not as a dictator motivate. They see it and they say, that's my hyperachiever. Not me, that's my hyperachiever. I usually work with women 6 to 8 months on their next level, and something I see constantly, and to be honest is my favorite result, is that at some point they detach from the result itself. And they start falling in love with their work, falling in love with themselves and the process of evolving. And this is so powerful. Sometimes we end our program and the next step is not there yet, but they feel completely different. And for me, that is the result I focus on. Because when you are able to be in love with where you are at this moment, you become a magnet for everything you want. And I want you also to ask yourself honestly, what has the hyperachiever already cost you? It might be relationships, it might be health, it might be presence, it might be creativity, it might be the ability to truly enjoy what you have built. And I want you to do this not to shame it, but to get radically honest about it, because that honesty is what creates the real motivation to shift. Step 2 is to decouple your identity from your output. This mindset shift, and I want to be honest, this is not something that happens in a few days, especially when many of us have built an entire identity on it. This is a muscle to train. It is the work of reclaiming your self-worth unconditional of any external validation. What I do many times with clients is to redefine success. Instead of tying it to external results, we tie it to values and identity. For example, I took this one from one of my mentors. I define a good day if I serve someone, I learn something, or I have fun and connection. That covers my key values and at the same time it builds identity. These are the small exercises that done consistently over 1 or 2 years make you the vision you are becoming. And here I want to name something important. While these anchors are meaningful and personal, they are also simple enough that you set yourself up to win. There is no way I do not hit at least one of them, even on the worst days. Another powerful exercise is Stephen Covey's Start with the End in Mind. He suggests imagining that you are at your own funeral looking back. What kind of leader do you want to have been? What do you want to have stood for? It sounds intense, but it gives you back perspective instantly. I always remember something my mom used to say, will this matter when you are 80? So back to you. Can you define success in a way that sets up you to win every single day? Step number 3. Build the practice of self-compassion. This is one you have probably heard me about before because I'm a big fan of this. And I come back to it because the research is so clear. Christine Neff work has been shown that self-compassion as one of the most powerful accelerators of growth and sustained performance. And I love the origin of this word. Compassion comes from the Latin, meaning being company in the suffering. So for me, it defines as being company to yourself in the ups and the downs of the human experience. Because when we are compassionate with ourselves, when we fail, when we fall short, when the result does not come, we pick ourselves up and say, let's try again tomorrow. And that little practice, done consistently, is the difference between success and failure over the long run. Because I always say, you decide when something becomes a failure. If you decide to start going to the gym 3 times a week and nothing visible changes in 2 months, is that a failure? Or is success the fact that you kept going? Because in a year, we all know what will happen. We all know the results will eventually catch up. And I want to say this directly to my senior listeners. You have spent years being rigorous with yourself because it worked. But at this level, the rigor needs to turn inwards in a different way, not as a weapon against yourself, but as a foundation. The most powerful leaders I know are not the ones who never doubt themselves. They are the ones who know how to pick themselves up faster. This practice has been a game changer for me in both progress and in how I feel about myself and my career. It is what allowed me to build NextFem leaders and everything we do today. Whenever I get interviewed and somebody asks me what's the single biggest change in my leadership has been, my answer is always the same. It has been becoming my own best fan. Because once you treat yourself the way you would treat your best friend, you become unstoppable. Think about your best friend. Think about the worst moments in your life and how key she was. How calm you felt hearing her voice. Now imagine you also have that voice in your own head. My favorite practice for self-compassion is the meta meditation. I actually have recorded a free version on Insight Timer some time ago, so I will link it in the show notes so you can also practice with me if that feels good. And a second tool you can use is writing down what you want to remind yourself on a hard day. You can even write a letter to yourself for the difficult moments, as a leader, as a woman, as a human. Step 4. Making celebration a non-negotiable habit. Hyperachievers, we are so bad at celebrating. We discount achievements instantly and move to the next target. The antidote is building a pause, a moment of real acknowledgement before the pivot. I have built this into my own weekly routine. Every Monday when I plan the week ahead, I take a few minutes to look back and write down the wins from the last week. It is also a gratitude practice, and the reason gratitude is so powerful is because of where it puts your focus. Instead of a half-empty glass, you are seeing everything you have already built, moved, and created. And I want to say this directly to my senior listeners: do not underestimate small, simple practices. Because we hyperachievers also do this. We dismiss what feels so simple. We wait for the complex solutions. We over-engineering the answers. But the divine is simple and the human is complex. Most of the time we're overcomplicating life and waiting for an equally complicated solution. Pick a time frame, test it, and let the results speak. And that's it for today, beautiful. If you recognize yourself in this episode, if you felt a little moment of, oh, that was me, I want you to know this. This is not a flaw. This is a strategy you learned, it served you, and now you're ready for the next version of it. And that is what we do in Becoming Her. We do not change who you are, we unlock the next level of who you already are. And sometimes it looks like a promotion, sometimes it looks like waking up on a Monday and actually loving where you are. And in my experience, both personally and with the women I work with, when you get to the second one, the first one always follows. If this episode resonates, I want to invite you to 2 things. First, take this free saboteur assessment from Positive Intelligence. I will link it in the show notes so you can see exactly where your hyperachiever is showing up. And second, if you're ready to do this work at a deeper level, Becoming Her was built exactly for this. Come find me on LinkedIn or visit isabelfonseca.com. I would love to be your sister in this process. And with that, I see you in the next episode. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you love what you heard, let me know on Instagram at NextFemLeaders or send your thoughts and reflections to info@isabelfonseca.com. I truly would love to hear from you. And if it resonates with you, I would be so grateful if you left a review or a comment so that it helps more conscious, ambitious women to find this space. And please don't keep it for yourself, send it to another woman you know who needs to hear this message today. Keep leading with your truth and remember, you already are an ex-fem leader.